Hello, welcome to the Comic Book Commentary. I'm Bo Leidig, and this week we're going to jump back into the very short-lived but also very unique series that is Wildstar, with Wildstar number 2. So let's zoom in and take a closer look. First published in May of 1993, we can see here that the cover of issue number 2 is not quite as striking as we saw with the cover of issue number 1, which is to be expected. It's very important that a number 1 issue of any book be very eye-catching and really draw someone into picking it up on the shelf and opening it up, kind of seeing what it's about. You really want to make that in-your-face statement with that first issue. And then you see here with the second issue, and obviously you can't expect him to do like the foil covers and stuff with every issue either. It's definitely more indicative of what you see with I don't want to say bog standard, but a more common comic book cover. Although I will point out that the image we see on the cover of this issue is very indicative of part of the story elements that are contained within this issue, which is something I always appreciate with covers. Al Gordon, co-creator, writer, inker. Jerry Ordway, co-creator, penciler. Reuben Rood, colorist. John Workman, letterer. Bill Bud Shakespeare, editor. Ollie Optics, color separator. On the first page, we are just thrown straight into it in a way that doesn't seem to make sense at all from where the story left off in the first issue, where we see Wildstar dodging an attack by some sort of weird zombie Incredible Hulk thing. I mean, I do like this monster guy. He's pretty cool looking. He's super unique. But like I said, given where the previous issue left off, we're just completely at a loss for what is happening in this image. We see as the monster's attack has failed that Wildstar wastes no time in going on a counter-offensive. As he rears back to throw a punch, the monster realizes that he wasted his one opportunity as Wildstar lunges forward and hits him with a huge left cross, knocking the hulking beast off of its feet and back through the air as we see it land on the ground, clutching its face in pain. However, Wildstar can't really let his guard down after taking down this monster as he begins to take laser fire from above. We see that the blast is coming from some sort of futuristic tank that almost looks like it would have been right at home in the pages of G.I. Joe. If you'd have told me that this tank right here came with, I think, the early 90s, like later series of like Toxic Joes, like a Toxic Viper or something, I feel like this would have fit right in with that, and I would have absolutely believed you. We see that Wildstar dodges out of the blast radius of the cannon, jumps to the top of the tank, grabs the barrel of the laser gun, and folds it over backwards, which causes some real problems inside of the tank as we see one of the occupants trying to evacuate. Suddenly, the whole tank explodes, throwing Wildstar and the man who was trying to get out of the tank off of it in a violent manner as we see Wildstar hit the ground and just scrape across it, leaving a trench in his wake. We then see that he gets to his feet and looks to see that Mickey is being attacked by two sort of like, I guess, kind of flying saucer, sort of almost snub fighters maybe, but they also seem to be equipped with laser weapons. Wildstar realizes that he has to save Mickey as he runs forward through the laser fire and tackles Mickey out of harm's way as they land not far from another laser blast. He gets him behind some cover, and then the two of them try to make their escape. However, the two saucer ships pursue Mickey and Wildstar, so Wildstar decides that his best option is to go on the counteroffensive as he leaps from the ground straight through the front end of one of the ships in an attempt to also neutralize the second ship. He grabs onto its laser turret. However, he does not realize that one of the gun barrels is far too close as it opens fire and blasts a huge chunk out of his side, as we can see his entrails actually trailing out of his body in a horrific and surely fatal wound. This, of course, knocks him off of the turret, but unfortunately, it launches him too close to the intake of one of the ship's turbines. As he tries to grab onto the wing, he can't. He instead grabs onto the rim of the intake. However, due to his injuries, he does not have the strength to hold on as he's being pulled further down into the turbine itself. As we can see his presumably colon and large intestine hanging out of his side as he's being pulled closer and closer to the whirling blades, and his demise seems imminent. Wildstar tries his best to hold on to the sides of the intake as we see his fingers actually gripping into the metal as he uses all of his might. However, the force of the intake is so much that even this amount of strength isn't enough to keep him from sliding further into the turbine, as we see even his star parasites start to try and grab onto the sides to help him. However, their combined efforts are not enough to overcome the force of the intake. Realizing that his doom is sealed, he decides to grab the parasite and rip it off of his chest in an attempt to try and save it, at least, as he pulls it off, even ripping a few of the tendrils of the parasite off. He then throws it out of the intake as the intake pulls him down all the way in. And then we see the turbine explode, taking the ship out of the air as we see Mickey try to jump to safety and avoid the certain crash and possible explosion of this ship. We are then suddenly transported to a truck in the middle of the desert as we see Wildstar screaming no and find out that this was all just a dream he was having as he had dozed off as Mickey was driving. However, the sudden outburst does scare Mickey as he swerves off the road and screeches to a halt. He then yells at Wildstar and asks him what the heck was that all about, and Wildstar apologizes, saying that he dozed off. And Mickey says that it must have happened pretty quick because he just fell asleep mid-sentence. Wildstar again apologizes and asks where he was. Mickey states that no place special, you were just telling me that you were from the future. Wildstar then, tries to get back into his place in the story and also tries to be patient with Mickey as he realizes that this is a lot for him to take in. And he also is, brings up something about Mickey, studying astrophysics and whatnot and particle physics. And Mickey also questions how on earth Wildstar knows so much about him. Wildstar, though, tells him that it's information that he can't really divulge as he can't tell Mickey too much about the future. Mickey states, hey, cool, you sound like my dad. This kind of puts a little grin on Wildstar's face. He then says that the whole point of him coming back here is because he's trying to prevent a horrible war that happens basically 30 years in their future, which, as I'm recording this video, would be like right now in real time, 2023, which is kind of funny that, there's this whole like, oh, it's way in the future. It's like, no, it's actually like right now. But that's the fun of looking at books from 30 years ago. Of course, Mickey isn't still sure if he believes everything that Wildstar is telling him and asks if the future war was caused by an AI that went rogue and launched nuclear missiles, and asks if, Wildstar's a fan of James Cameron, which I thought was a cool little thing. Terminator 2 having just come out, I think in 91, if I'm remembering correctly. So it would have been poignant to this story. However, Wildstar begins to tell him that there was an alien race called the Keoans who came to Earth that were searching for a very special material. This, of course, in this storyline is what the Roswell, New Mexico crash was, and that these aliens decided to exchange their incredible technology that, of course, 1940s U.S. the 1940s U.S. government would have never been able to imagine in their wildest dreams, in exchange for the ability to search the planet without any interruption. This, of course, is a deal that the U.S. government decided they couldn't pass up, so they, of course, just agreed to it. And then, things just kind of were going along just fine until another alien race showed up years later called the Rosplar, I believe is how you say that. It's spelled kind of weird. And they were looking for the same material, and they went to the, I guess, adversaries or enemies of the US to trade their technology in exchange for the ability to search their lands, which started to cause some real problems going forward. As we see the two of them continue to drive through the desert, Wildstar is directing Mickey to a location that he needs to get to. Also, they rented this truck from somewhere in the middle of the desert. They don't really explain where, but it seems unlikely that there's just a truck rental place in the middle of absolute nowhere in the desert. But, that was the story device they needed to get these two to where they were going, I guess. As they continue to talk, Wildstar explains to Mickey that the war between the Kioans and the Rosplar continued to escalate as the two of them kept supplying adversarial forces with increasingly higher levels of technology to keep the war going, which I understand the two of them are opposing forces, but it's also, I guess, kind of counterproductive for them to be trying to search for some kind of undisclosed special thing that they needed, while at the same time creating a full-scale world war, as it would seem. Eventually, the Rosplar were able to steal a time machine of sorts and use that time machine to... Well, essentially, they placed one in the past, aka now, 1993. And then they also had one in the future, aka 2023. And the way that Wildstar explains it is that these time machines don't work in the sense that you're really able to just travel to anywhere you want in time, like in Back to the Future or something along those lines. It's that they work by acting as a beacon. So the only thing you can do is go to the timeline or the place in time where the other one is located at. So because one of them was left here in 1993 in the middle of the desert, that's the only place he can travel to from the future. As they continue to move forward, they get out of the truck. We see that Mickey is helping Wildstar climb up the side of a small rock outcropping. Wildstar continues to explain that he came back because if he can destroy the beacon in the past, it will prevent the Rosplar from getting their armada to Earth, and that he can prevent the war from ever happening. Mickey thinks that this is all a lot to take in, and he's right, it is. However, Wildstar explains to him that the reason that he knows this will work because he talked to a mischievous goddess. And this, of course, is something that Mickey is just like, all right, this seems a little far-fetched. And to be fair to him, it is kind of a lot to take in. She is from a legend from the Kioans, and she apparently has the ability to help a warrior to stop the war from ever happening as they continue to climb up the rock grouping here. They get to a ledge, and Wildstar tells him that this is where he needs to be at and that Mickey can go back to town now. Mickey seems a little hesitant to just leave him behind, but Wildstar tells him it's going to be okay as Mickey starts to climb back down, kind of, slowly sliding down the rock face, doing his best not to just fall and break his leg. As Mickey continues to climb down the rock facing, he looks up and sees that Wildstar is peeling the symbiote off of his body, almost as if it's kind of deteriorating. However, this is kind of a really unique story point because it's basically showing that the symbiote itself is not technically necessary for him and that it's not essentially a full part of the parasite. Up until this point, it was believed that, or at least kind of insinuated, that the symbiote worked similar to that of something like Venom or Carnage, where the symbiote itself was an organism as a whole. Whereas now we're shown that the symbiote is really, almost something akin to like a deer antler or something, where it is part of the parasite. However, it can be dropped and shedded off with no ramifications to the actual creature itself as it all dissolves while it falls to the ground. We then see Wildstar bend down. We also notice that Wildstar has a fully cybernetic leg, and that, these battles have been taking their toll on him. As he sits down, he is starting to be basked in the glow of the rising sun. Mickey looks upward at him as we see Wildstar turn and look down at him, noticing that he's got quite a few scars on his face, again, showing the long-term effects of all of the fighting that he's been doing. And we then see Mickey start the truck and drive off as Wildstar begins to meditate, apparently, in the sunlight. Mickey is trying to process everything that's going on here, not really sure if he believes any of the story that Wildstar told him, when suddenly he has to lock up the brakes as we see Hotwire, a member of the team of, I guess, evil warriors, let's call them, that Wildstar was fighting in the future and who got sent back in time with all of them. He, of course, does not have any visible parasites on him and looks like a normal human. So, of course, Mickey doesn't seem to think anything is weird. He asks the guy, what's going on? Why did he just jump in front of his truck like that? Hotwire apologizes and states that he just got lost out here in the desert while camping and that he needs to hitch a ride back to town. Mickey, of course, obliges, trying to just be a nice guy and help him out, as we see Hotwire get into the truck and the two of them drive back into town as Mickey needs to get back to his dad and the lab to make sure that everyone knows he's okay. Unfortunately for Mickey, back at Skytech Labs, the team led by Deadstar, who were trying to defeat and potentially kill Wildstar, are already laying the groundwork for trying to mislead Mickey's dad and the US military, as they basically tell the story of them coming back from the future as them being the heroes, and that they're the ones who are actually trying to stop the Rasplar invasion, even though it was stated in the first issue that they are actually working for the Rasplar and that it's Wildstar who's trying to prevent this. He explains to Mickey's dad that they came back from the future and that they need to prevent the beacon from being activated so that the Rasplar Armada never shows up to Earth, because, as he states, in their future, due to the Keon giving them, or the Earthlings, technology from the 1940s on, they were able to withstand the assault from the Rasplar in the future. However, if the Rasplar are to invade in 1993, the human race will not be ready and that the Earth will be conquered. Mickey's dad is a little bit skeptical about this story, as he states it still doesn't really explain the disappearance of Intersci Labs, which Wildstar explained to Mickey. Intersci Labs wasn't destroyed, it merely switched places with the Intersci Labs from the future, which is why it's all rubble now, because it was destroyed in the future. However, as Mickey stated, this is kind of a paradox, because now that it's been brought into the future and that the destroyed one has been brought back to the past, that it can no longer be destroyed in the past, which is a good point on Mickey's part. This is one of the problems I really have with a lot of time travel stories, is that you get into paradoxes, and there's also the idea that once Wildstar left the future and went back to the past, he created an offshoot alternate timeline and can now no longer do anything that will affect the future that he came from. It's a whole lot of problems, but that's okay. We're going to move past that and just accept the fact that it's a comic book and maybe physics don't matter. Mickey's dad continues to converse with other scientists. They even referenced the Tunguska event at one point, which was a presumed meteor explosion that happened over Siberia in 1908. It's a really cool story if you've never read about it. I suggest you look into it. There's a lot of research and some speculation that's gone into that, but it's a really unique thing to look at that happened in actual history. The conversation is interrupted when another member of Sky Tech shows up and tells Mickey's dad that they still haven't heard from Mickey and gives him a package that was delivered to him. This, of course, reminds the general that he's still upset about the fact that Mickey was there in the first place. The two of them get an argument about security clearances and whatnot, when they're interrupted by Mickey suddenly showing back up and him giving the false cover story that he just got lost while they were trying to gather information about the what they believe was destruction of Interpsi Labs, and that he ended up having to hitch a ride back to town. This, of course, leaves Mickey's dad flabbergasted. The general is still upset about the whole thing, but they're interrupted when Deadstar states that he believes he knows who Mickey is, as he asks if he is Mickey Gabriel. Mickey tells him he is, and Deadstar believes that this is the perfect opportunity to take care of a problem without having to get their hands too dirty. Mickey seems a bit confused as we see Jumpstart looking very worried about what's about to take place. We see Deadstar's hands start to glow with energy as he is presumably about to kill Mickey. However, he turns around to see Jumpstart looking very upset, and Mazer, realizing that this may not be the best plan of action, as he intervenes and grabs Deadstar's shoulder, stating that maybe they shouldn't go off half-cocked and that they should gather a little bit more information before they decide what their next move should be. Deadstar agrees to this and, lets go of Mickey. However, Mickey's dad is still pretty upset about what just happened and wants to know exactly what the hell's going down. Meanwhile, Jumpstart states that Mickey owes her one, which I don't understand how, because it was Mazer that intervened and stopped everything. Mickey is starting to get pretty overwhelmed as he says he needs a glass of water. We then find from another scientist that all of the information and research that was in their computers has suddenly disappeared. Mickey's dad doesn't understand how this could have happened, as no one else would have had the code necessarily to take all of their research. When the general intervenes and states that it was the Pentagon that did this, as they wanted to transfer all the information to a more secured site. This, of course, enrages Deadstar, as he is now angry that the information that they were looking for the whole time is no longer within his grasp. He grabs the general and states that he needs to hand over the information immediately and tell him where it's at. The general tries to refuse at first, but Deadstar then picks him up and grabs him by the throat, stating that he's got 5 seconds to tell him where the information is. This, of course, alerts two of the guards that are along with the general, who draw their guns on Deadstar, as Mickey seems to start to panic. The general, however, gives in and states that they are at the top secret facility called Blue Compound, which is apparently not going to help Deadstar, as even if he knows where the compound is, it's heavily guarded in a super secure black site, which means that he would basically have to face off against the entire US military to be able to get in. However, Deadstar doesn't seem to be too worried about the prospects of having to deal with that kind of a contingency, and basically calls the general's bluff on it. Mickey yells at Deadstar, stating that he needs to stop, and calls him crazy. Deadstar states that some things never change, as he throws the general aside and starts to make his way towards Mickey. Mickey's dad, however, lunges forward and says to stay away from him, as we see the general plop down on the floor in front of a familiar pair of feet. Deadstar grabs Mickey's dad and says, does everyone in your family think that they're some kind of hero? However, we see once again this familiar body and a speech bubble that says he's twice the man you'll ever be, as the general seems confused and Darkstar seems confused. Meanwhile, outside the lab, the guards who are with the general and the military transport ask if any of them just heard something, when suddenly Deadstar comes exploding through the wall of the lab and crashes into one of the military transport trucks, and actually does a significant amount of damage to the truck, which means that Deadstar's body is pretty durable, given that he can cause this kind of damage to, presumably concrete walls and, reinforced steel of a military transport truck. It's pretty surprising that he doesn't seem to suffer all that much damage. Back inside the lab, The members of Deadstar's team are surprised to see Wildstar and can't believe that he's just taken Deadstar down with one punch. However, they are happy that they don't have to go looking for him, as we see the general trying to figure out what's going on. Mazer, however, doesn't waste any time in pressing his attack, which I guess is some sort of psionic blast type of thing, maybe telekinetic. It doesn't seem to do any kind of mental damage, but it does seem to physically knock Wildstar off of his feet into these two guys, who, by the way, we still have no idea who the hell they even are. This is two issues in which these two members of Deadstar's team have still yet to be named, which is a little irritating. I understand it can kind of take you out of the story and be a little cliche for when a villain shows up to have like a little blurb of what their name is, but it's really convenient when you're world building a brand new story with a whole brand new set of characters that nobody knows, and it helps the reader kind of keep track of what's going on. Right now, we still are just at a loss for who the hell these guys even are. Meanwhile, the general decides to start to call for backup as we see Wildstar lunge forward and grab the guy in the trench coat, as the guy in the green armor is trying to figure out what he needs to do. However, despite Wildstar's quick action, apparently this guy with the trench coat has a transfer teleport ability, which apparently gives him the ability to switch places with someone else. He uses this, which then switches Wildstar behind him, who is now grasping the guy in the green armor, whose abilities we're not sure what those are, if he has any abilities at all. Wildstar is more than a match for him as he grabs him by both of his arms and then throws him out through the hole in the wall and directly into Deadstar's face. Meanwhile, back inside the lab, Freeze Zone takes the opportunity to attack Wildstar from behind and starts using her cold powers. However, this doesn't work fast enough as Wildstar is able to hit her with a fast back elbow, knocking her off her feet. It's also probable that his symbiote is offering him some kind of protection here. She falls down and is very upset about the fact that he's launching a counterattack, as she pulls out apparently some kind of freeze ray and takes aim to try and subdue Wildstar with that. However, Wildstar ducks under the attack and she instead hits Mazer directly in the face, which, assumingly, you would think that freezing his entire head and hands in a block of ice would be enough to kill him. However, it seems to just put him down on his knees. Wildstar then grabs and throws the guy in the trench coat directly into Freeze Zone, taking them both out. Jumpstart, meanwhile, is going after the general, who believes she's non-threatening and states that he doesn't want to have to hurt her. However, she then uses her powers to start electrocuting him, which I'm guessing from the way it's portrayed that she doesn't have the ability to actually launch electricity out of her body. She has to actually come in contact with someone to, basically energize them, which is actually kind of a cool, way of keeping her from being overpowered, but also being very dangerous at the same time. As Jumpstart continues to shock the general, she is yelled at by Deadstar, who tells her to stop screwing around and to finish off the general along with Mickey's dad. She actually seems a little reluctant to do this, as she apologizes to Mickey's dad, stating that she does not want to end him this way. However, before she can initiate her attack, she's tackled from behind by Mickey, who lands on top of her. She, of course, continues the sultry act, as she says she always figured him for the rough type. However, Wildstar at this point realizes that it's more important for him to get Mickey and his father to safety than it is for him to continue this battle, as he grabs Mickey's dad and Mickey by the belt and starts to run with the two of them as Deadstar tries to block their path. Wildstar actually just runs right through him, knocking him into the air. He gets the two of them outside and states that Mickey's dad needs to find a safe place to hunker down and hide out while he gets Mickey out of here. His dad doesn't seem to want to go along with the idea. However, Wildstar, while at the same time taking out the guy in the green armor with a back kick, tells Mickey's dad to stop arguing and just do what he says, as he grabs Mickey, runs forward with him, and then jumps into the air, as apparently Wildstar can fly, and we weren't aware of it really up until this point. The General and Mickey's dad both seem to be rather surprised by this, as the General radios ahead to the New Blue Research Center and states that Wildstar is headed their way, that he's one of those super types, referencing, that they are part of the greater Image universe. But honestly, I don't see why you would be. It'd be so difficult to try and make this story fit in with the rest of the Image universe at this time in 93. But, again, that was kind of one of those weird caveats that they had, that everything had to be part of this greater universe, even though some of the stories would have been far better off as just being their own standalone thing. We see that Mickey is rather surprised by this and doesn't know what to think of being, 20 stories in the air looking down at everyone else as Wildstar carries him to safety. And that's the end of this part of the story, as we see this is the last page of the story part of the issue. And then we get into the wild cards and letters. And this is the most annoying letter section I think I've ever read. Bill, aka Bud Shakespeare, writes all of the responses in this letter section in this weird mix between Shakespearean Old English and early 90s surfer dude lingo, and it feels so forced and so stupid and so just incredibly difficult to follow at times, because you're trying to speak in a manner that no human being actually speaks in. This is ridiculous. Why wouldn't you do this? Just respond to people's letters. Into the actual letters themselves, most of them are, just generic praise, although there was one that brought up how disturbing the violence and gore in the first issue of Wildstar was. Not that it's over the top in any sense, like it's not actually as violent as other Image comics, especially Spawn. Spawn had a much higher level of violence in it and gore than Wildstar does. It's just that the way that the violence and gore is portrayed in Wildstar is just very disconcerting in some aspects. Like the part where he rips the parasite off the guy's face and it rips the whole guy's face off with it, but the guy's still alive. It's just that very unsettling level of just like pain and almost, real visceral gore that, people were caught off guard by. Even that we saw in the beginning of this issue when, Wildstar takes that blast to his side, and instead of just being bleeding, like he's actually got organs falling out of him. It's just one of those things where it's not done in a completely over the top way where there's just blood gushing everywhere on every page, but it's done in a way that feels very gut wrenching when you see it. And if you weren't ready for it, I could see how it would really catch you off guard. On the next page, we get 2 more full pages of letters. Like I said, there's only one super interesting letter in this entire section, but we do here at the end get a cool little preview of the cover of the 3rd issue and the cameo appearance of one Savage Dragon. If you'd like to know more about the Savage Dragon, please feel free to check out my Savage Dragon playlist. We are then once again greeted by Image Info, the standard little information blog about upcoming books in the Image publishing line. Nothing special about it. And then we see an advertisement for Trencher. I'm pretty certain I have at least Trencher number 1, but that's probably the only issue of Trencher I have. I don't know, I could be wrong. I'll have to really dig through my collection. One day I'll get around to doing a video about Trencher. I always did like the Trencher logo, though. I love the fact that the T in it is a shot of him walking away with his trench coat and, just looking all buff and muscular. I always thought that was super creative, and that was one of the things I always felt was very unique about this book. On the final page of the book, we get an advertisement for the Super Nintendo game Firepower 2000. I don't remember this game. I never played it. However, being that it's a Sunsoft title, I'd be willing to give it the benefit of the doubt. Overwhelmingly, my youth was filled with good experiences from all of the games that came from Sunsoft that I played. They very much had more hits than misses, in my opinion. But like I said, there were some misses, and maybe this was one of them. If you ever actually played this game, feel free to leave a comment about what you thought about it. I'd like to know exactly how it played and what it was about. And on the reverse inside cover, we get an advertisement for a mail away for Wildstar t-shirts. And there cannot have been many of these that were printed up, man. Wildstar didn't last very long, and I don't recall how popular it was at the time. But given the fact that there's only a total of 7 issues, they could not have been printing these t-shirts for a long period of time. So I'd assume that there weren't a huge number of these that got sold. And I'd be really, really interested in trying to get my hands on one today, just for the fact that, I think Wildstar is cool, despite the fact that most people probably have no idea who Wildstar is. Whatever. I still think that it's awesome these shirts exist, and if I ever found one floating around at like a thrift shop or maybe on eBay and it was in my size, I don't know that I'd be able to resist buying it. And that was Wildstar number 2 from the original Wildstar miniseries. Overall, I think it's actually a really good book. It does a fantastic job of progressing the story. There's a lot of exposition in this one, but I feel like it's very necessary to really get a grasp and understanding of exactly the type of world building that they needed to do to make all this coherent. The only thing I think, I don't know if I'd even call this a criticism, but it's just very odd when you're reading it, is that there's a lot of pages in this issue that have literally no dialogue, and then a lot of pages that just have walls of dialogue. And it's a stark contrast, and I think they make it work okay, but it is odd to just go, especially, the beginning of the book opens with like 4 full pages of literally just action sequences and no dialogue whatsoever, to suddenly a crap load of exposition where Wildstar is explaining to Mickey what exactly was going on in the future and what caused it and why he's come back to stop it and how he's come back to stop it. It's a lot to try and take in, and I feel like it almost would have worked better to spread it out a little bit more evenly throughout the book. But those are just my opinions. Your opinions may differ. You may have thought they did a great job, and if you do, that's okay. Everyone's entitled to their own opinion. If you enjoyed today's video, please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. And thanks for stopping by. Have a great day.